The snow was falling harder that morning, but Jon didn't feel the cold anymore. He stood near the top of the wall, Ghost beside him, eyes locked on the distant woods. So much had changed. The north burned, the south plotted, and the Night's Watch. They had become something else, something twisted. He had given his life for them once, but not again. Down below, a raven waited. It carried a letter from a ghost he thought lost. Robb Stark. Jon had read the message 100 times already. The words still burned in his mind like fire. "Brother, if you are still alive, ride to River Run. The North needs not just a king, but a wolf with fire in his blood. You and I, we are the last of what matters. Come, let us make the world remember House Stark. Let the world tremble beneath the wolves of fire and ice." Jon closed his eyes. Fire and ice, Targaryen and Stark, bastard and king. He didn't want power. He never did. But they had taken everything. Robb's crown, Ned's honor, Catelyn's warmth, and his own peace. Jon looked at Ghost. "We ride south." River Run had changed. It was no longer ruled by petty lords and squabbling bannermen. Robb had taken it by force, with what remained of the Stark loyalists, the river lords, and broken soldiers who still believed in honor. But he was not the same boy who rode off to war with a direwolf and a heart full of dreams. Robb had lost too much. His wife, his mother, his crown. When Jon arrived, Robb stood outside the gates to greet him, older, harder, and yet with eyes that held hope again. They embraced like lost brothers returned from death. Robb's voice was rough. "You came," Jon nodded. "The Watch lost its way. The South burns in lies. It's time we change the game." A fire was lit that night. By the next moon, whispers spread like wind. The bastard of Winterfell returns. The young wolf lives. And together they were preparing something new, something dangerous. Not rebellion, not revenge, a rebirth. Jon didn't wear the black anymore. Robb didn't wear the crown of a southern king. Together they forged something new. Robb wore iron and ice. Jon, leather and dragon scale. Their sigil was carved with 2 direwolves, one in silver, one in flame. The South mocked them, called them fools, traitors, ghosts clinging to broken oaths. But the people, the North remembered. The Riverlands remembered. Even the Stormlands, torn apart by the wars, began to listen. They came, outlaws, broken knights, blacksmiths, farmers, women who had lost sons, men who had lost brothers. They came not for power, but for something that felt forgotten. Justice, and at the center of it stood 2 brothers, one born in fire, one forged in ice, neither kneeling to a throne made of swords, nor bound by the lies of lords. One night, as they stood over a map of Westeros, Jon asked, "Do you really think we can win this?" Robb looked at him, not with doubt, but with fire. "We already have. We made them fear again. Not dragons, not kings, but wolves." The room went silent. The torches flickered. Outside, the people began calling them something new. Not kings, not rebels, but the wolves of fire and ice. The storm came quickly, not from the sky, but from King's Landing. Queen Cersei Lannister sat on the Iron Throne like it belonged to her blood. Her golden hair had dulled with time, her eyes colder than ever. She heard the reports with a mocking smile at first. The bastard and the Ghost King have reunited. She called them howling dogs, desperate for scraps. But that smile didn't last. Within weeks, entire villages had risen up in the Riverlands, throwing down Lannister banners and replacing them with the sigil of 2 wolves, one of ice, the other of flame. Northern men, Riverlanders, even deserters from Dorne and the Reach came forward. The wolves weren't just calling lords. They were calling people, and people were listening. Cersei's generals wanted to act fast. Crush the rebellion early. Send the mountain. Burn every village that even whispers of the wolves. But Cersei was smarter than rage. She wanted a trap. She sent 3,000 men, led by Sir Gorman Peake, a loyal but brutal knight with no heart and no soul. Their mission? Break River Run. Kill Robb and Jon. End the rebellion before it became a storm. But Robb was no longer a boy with dreams of honor. And Jon had seen things beyond the wall. He had died once. He didn't fear death anymore. They planned ahead. Instead of fortifying River Run, Robb ordered it half-emptied. Soldiers were placed in the hills, hidden in the woods, disguised as farmers. Jon took a company of wildlings and Northmen and rode out by night, ghosting behind enemy lines. When Sir Gorman arrived with his 3,000, he found the gates of River Run open, empty, quiet. A trap, he thought. He was right, but not the kind he expected. As he pushed inside with his full force, Jon and Robb struck from both sides, like wolves snapping from the snow. It wasn't a battle. It was a massacre. Arrows rained from the sky. Fire traps ignited behind them. The river was turned into a cage of smoke and flame. Gorman's men panicked, their formations broken. They tried to flee only to find Ghost, white as snow, soaked in red, leading a pack of hounds bred for war. By nightfall, the Lannister army was nothing but ash bodies and blood-soaked mud. Jon stood over Sir Gorman, who lay wounded, face half-burned. The knight spat, even in defeat. "You bastards think you've won. The lion will wake, and when it does, it will rip your throats." Jon looked him in the eye, then let it wake. He slit his throat clean. Back in River Run, fires burned high to celebrate. Men sang songs not of kings, but of wolves who outwitted lions. Robb sat at the high table, his armor off, his tunic stained with blood, and yet a fire behind his tired eyes. Jon sat across from him. Quiet as always. "You killed Gorman," Robb said. "He would have done worse to us," Jon answered. "That's not what I meant." Robb leaned forward. "I mean, you didn't hesitate." Not like before. Jon didn't look away. "I don't have the luxury of doubt anymore. Not in this world." They both drank in silence. Around them, laughter echoed. Bread and meat passed between hands. Even the broken found reason to smile that night. But something hung heavy between the brothers. Something unsaid. Jon finally spoke it. "What happens when we win?" Robb raised an eyebrow. "We take back the North. We give the people their homes, justice, a future." "No," Jon said softly. "I mean us. You're a king by name, whether you want it or not. I'm something else. A brother. A threat." Robb stared at him. "You think I see you that way?" "Not you," Jon replied, "but others will. Lords don't trust what they don't understand. And I'm no longer just Ned Stark's bastard. I have Targaryen blood in me, and dragons don't mix well with wolves." Robb stood, walked around the table, and placed a firm hand on Jon's shoulder. "Listen to me. I don't care if your blood is fire or ice. You're my brother. We built this together, and I'm not letting any lord or dragon queen or golden lion tear that apart." Jon looked up, something unreadable in his eyes. He wanted to believe it. He truly did. But somewhere deep in his bones the cold told him peace like this wouldn't last. Not in Westeros, and far to the east beyond the narrow sea a shadow stirred. Daenerys Stormborn stood on the deck of her ship, dragons circling above, her eyes watching the horizon. Word had reached her too. The North rises, and the blood of my house rides with wolves. She turned to Missandei. "Jon Snow, that's what they call him. But he has my brother's blood." Missandei nodded. "Do you think he's a threat?" "No," Daenerys whispered. "He's a rival." She looked to her dragons, and rivals burn. Back in River Run, Robb and Jon prepared for the next move. The Vale had sent quiet ravens, curious. Dawn was stirring, and whispers spoke of Arya, a shadow with many faces, hunting in the dark corners of the south. The war hadn't ended. It had just begun. And this time, the game wasn't for a throne. It was for the soul of Westeros. Two brothers, one born of ice, one born of fire, and the world would learn to fear them both. Fire, and the world would learn to fear them both. The ravens flew faster than horses. Every lord, from the Neck to the Reach, had heard of the River Run massacre. Sir Gorman's head was sent back to King's Landing in a box. The red wax seal cracked in silence as Cersei opened it, and the sight of his burned, beheaded corpse made her drop her wine. The wolves weren't playing politics. They were declaring war. Far to the north, Winterfell remained in uneasy hands. Though Roose Bolton was gone, his bastard son Ramsay still ruled it with blood and terror. The Dreadfort's banners still hung, but behind every stone, fear whispered the truth. The North remembered, and the North was tired of being ruled by monsters. Lady Barbary Dustin sent secret messages. House Manderley sharpened their swords. Even the wild Karstarks, once loyal to Bolton, now waited to see which way the wind blew, and then the wind shifted. Ravens arrived in the dead of night. 3 words, sealed with a wax mark of 2 wolves, burned across every parchment: "Winter is ours." At first, Ramsay laughed. "Let the bastards bark," he told his men. "We'll skin them like the last one." But even his dogs seemed uneasy, because from the woods, from the rivers, from the shadows of the north, men and women began disappearing from their homes. Some to fight, some to serve, some just to believe again. They followed a whisper: "The young wolf lives, and the bastard of Winterfell is fire-born." At River Run, Jon woke before dawn. The dreams had returned. He saw a great field of snow stained with blood. He saw a dragon flying low over smoke. He heard his own voice, whispering to himself in the dark, "You are not who they think you are." He sat up, sweat on his brow. Ghost, half asleep by the doorway, growled softly. Not in anger, in warning. Jon stepped outside his tent. A man was waiting, hooded, scarred, eyes sharp as blades. "Name?" Jon asked. The man grinned. "I had many, but you'd know me as the Hound." Sandor Clegane had come not for honor, nor glory, nor even revenge. He had come because fire still haunted him. And yet, somewhere in him, a part still believed in something. Maybe not gods, but maybe wolves. "I heard you're different," he said to Jon. "Not like the others. Not soft like Robb, not mad like Dany, but cold." "Like me?" Jon said nothing, only stared. Sandor laughed. "You'll do. With the Hound came others, men who fought at the Blackwater, men who had been left to die in the Reach, women who had lost everything but their rage. They didn't want a king. They wanted a leader who could burn the world down if needed, and still walk through the ashes. Jon was that. Robb, meanwhile, had ridden north with 1,000 men. The plan was bold: take Winterfell before Cersei could react. Send a message not just of resistance, but of return. The Starks were not exiles anymore. They were coming home, but the path north was dangerous. Spies hunted their movements. Bolton loyalists set ambushes in the woods. Twice they were nearly caught by riders from the Dreadfort. At night, Robb sat by the fire, staring at the flames, speaking only to grey wind, the silent, fierce shadow by his side. He missed his mother, missed his wife, missed not being at war. But most of all, he feared something he hadn't spoken aloud. Jon, his brother, was not the same boy he'd known. Not the quiet bastard with snow in his hair and doubt in his heart. He was harder now, sharper, and somewhere behind those dark eyes, Robb saw something. Unnatural, not evil, just powerful, too powerful. What happens if he doesn't stop at the north? One of his bannermen had asked. What if his fire burns further south? Robb didn't answer then, but in his heart. The question festered. 3 days from Winterfell, they met a girl on the road, hooded, silent, carrying a satchel of faces, Arya. She said nothing when she saw Robb, only walked up and hugged him like the war had never happened, and for a moment it felt like home. But her eyes were sharper than his sword, her voice cold and dry. She had changed too. "I heard Jon's alive," she said quietly. "He is." Arya looked toward the north. "Good, we'll need him. Because I've seen things, Robb, things coming. Not from the south, from beyond." Robb furrowed his brow. "What things?" Arya didn't smile. "Things that don't bleed." Back in River Run, Jon sat at the war table when another raven arrived. It bore the seal of House Targaryen. He broke it open. "I would speak with the one they call Snow. I would meet the wolf born of fire. Come to Dragonstone, alone. Daenerys Targaryen." Jon read the words again. Then again. Ghost growled softly beside him, uneasy. He looked out toward the horizon, his mind clouded. Was it a trap? Was it a call for peace? Or something else? He didn't know, but something in his blood answered her call. Like fire calling fire, the pieces were moving. The wolves were rising. The lions were bleeding. And the dragon had just opened her eyes. And the north? It would burn or freeze, depending on which wolf held the leash. Dragonstone was cold, grey, and carved from stone that remembered fire. Jon arrived with only Ghost and a handful of silent guards. The wind howled like an old god warning him not to enter. But he walked through the great doors anyway. Daenerys Stormborn stood before the throne, not sitting, not smiling, draped in black and silver. Her eyes held questions. Her posture held power. "Jon Snow," she said. "Or should I call you Aegon Targaryen?" Jon's jaw tightened. "I didn't come for games." "No games," she replied. "Only truth." They stood there, two pieces of a broken dynasty, staring at each other. Fire meeting fire. Yet both chilled by doubt. She spoke first. "You claim the North with my blood. You rally the Riverlands. You strike my enemies. But you don't call yourself king." "I never wanted a crown," Jon said. "Only justice, justice." Daenerys stepped closer. "Justice burns cities. Justice crucifies slavers. Justice doesn't come wearing a wolf's skin. It comes with fire." He met her gaze. "Maybe, but fire without mercy becomes something else." A silence hung. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled. "You remind me of myself. Before I learned better." Jon raised an eyebrow. "And what did you learn?" Daenerys looked past him, out the window where Drogon circled in the clouds. "That no one is born to rule," she whispered. "You have to take it." Back in the north, Robb Stark stood at the gates of Winterfell. Snow fell heavy. His men stood quiet. Grey wind prowled at his side, ears low, teeth bared. The castle was dark, its walls soaked in years of silence and blood. Inside, Ramsay Bolton waited, with flayed men nailed to the ramparts and arrows aimed at the stars. But Robb wasn't the same boy who once believed in banners and honor. That boy died at the Red Wedding. This Robb came with vengeance. He didn't waste time. At his signal, the siege began. Catapults launched flame. Archers rained death. Tunnels dug beneath the wall. Screams echoed through the north as the battle for home began. Ramsay didn't flinch. He was madness made flesh. He released his hounds, sent flayed bodies down the walls as a message. But the north didn't scare like it used to, because Robb Stark was back, and he didn't come to bargain. Inside Winterfell, a servant girl moved through the shadows. She wore Bolton colors, but under her cloak, a dagger. Her face not her own, Arya. She slipped through halls she once ran through as a child. Ghosts haunted every stone. She saw the tree where Ned used to kneel, the tower where Bran fell, the room where Jon once slept. But she wasn't a child anymore. She found Ramsay in the hall, barking orders, his eyes wild with war. He didn't see her coming. The first knife went through his kidney, the second across his throat. He fell to his knees, gagging. She leaned in close and whispered, "The North remembers." Then she cut out his tongue. Outside, the Bolton banners burned. A white banner rose over Winterfell, bearing the direwolf once more. The North cheered. Robb walked through the gates not as a fugitive, but as a Stark returned. He found Arya in the great hall, sitting by the fire, sharpening her blade. "You saved the North," he said. She didn't look up. "No, I just cleaned the mess." They didn't hug. They didn't cry. But between them, a silence was shared, made of scars, of blood, of all they had lost. News of Ramsay's death spread like wildfire. From dawn to the Vale, the message was clear. The Starks were back, but not everyone cheered. In King's Landing, Cersei stood beside a black banner soaked in gold and wine. "They're spreading like rot," she hissed. Qyburn leaned in. "Shall I release the rumors about the Targaryen blood? The bastard king with dragon blood and northern steel? It might divide them," Cersei smiled. "Let the wolves turn on each other. All it takes is one spark," and that spark was coming. Because Jon had returned from Dragonstone, he didn't speak of what Daenerys offered him, only that she would wait. "No armies, no threats. Just an offer. Fire and blood," Jon said quietly. "That's her way." Robb listened, arms crossed, face tight. "And yours?" Jon stared into the fire. "Ice and ash." That night the wolves drank, feasted, laughed, all except the brothers. They sat apart. Something had shifted between them. Old warmth cooled. Trust wore a new skin. Jon had fire in his veins. And Robb. He had the North's heart. But what happens when two leaders walk the same path? Toward different thrones? Far to the east, Daenerys stood alone on Dragonstone's cliff. Viserion roared in the sky. Rhaegal hovered. Drogon landed beside her with a crash of wings. Her hand burned where Jon had touched her. "He doesn't know what he is," she whispered. Missandei stepped forward. "He is still your blood." "Yes," Daenerys said, her eyes cold. "And blood is the first price of war." The wolves of fire and ice had changed the game, but in Westeros, victory never comes without betrayal. And peace. Peace is just the pause before the blade falls. Peace is just the pause before the blade falls. Winterfell had never felt colder. Though the halls were filled with cheers, the fires lit bright, and banners of House Stark flew high once more. Something bitter clung to the air. Robb walked the corridors with Grey Wind by his side, nodding to lords, sharing wine with bannermen, but his eyes always drifted to the chair his father once ruled from. It was his now, and yet it didn't feel like a victory, because Jon stood across the hall, surrounded by men who didn't belong here. Wildlings, the Hound, exiled knights, broken swords who swore no oaths, men who followed Jon, not House Stark. At the feast, Lord Manderley leaned close and whispered, "Your brother draws strange company." Robb didn't answer. Then the second whisper came, louder this time. "The bastard of Winterfell may have dragonfire in his blood, but who says it makes him one of us?" Arya noticed the distance too. She sat between Jon and Robb, watching their silences speak louder than their words. When they drank, they didn't toast together. When they laughed, it wasn't at the same jokes. And when Robb raised a horn to the north, Jon stayed seated. Later that night, she found Jon alone in the crypts, standing before Ned Stark's statue. "I remember when you used to come here just to hide," she said quietly. Jon smiled faintly. "Now I come here to remember who I am." Arya stepped beside him. "Do you still know?" He looked at her, and for a moment he looked lost. "Everyone wants something from me," he said. "They want me to lead, to kneel, to burn, to fight. But no one asks me what I want." She tilted her head. "So what do you want?" Jon didn't answer, because he didn't know anymore. In the great hall above, Robb spoke with the lords of the north. Plans were made. Armies counted. The Vale had begun to stir. Sansa's letters had found ears among the Arryns. The Riverlands were holding, but Lannister forces were regrouping, and worse. Daenerys had sent a second raven. It arrived bearing a gift, a dragon scale wrapped in black silk. No threats, no words, just a message burned in fire. "He belongs with me." Robb crushed the scale in his fist. The next morning, the snow fell harder than it had all year. A meeting was called in the Godswood. Jon, Robb, Arya, Davos, the lords of the north, the river lords. Even Tormund, wrapped in furs, stood beside Jon, arms crossed, eyes wary of the southern banners. Robb stood before them all. "The south will move soon," he said. "Cersei won't sit while we raise armies. And the Dragon Queen watches from Dragonstone." "If we don't strike first," Jon interrupted, "we should speak with her, not start another war." Some men scoffed. Robb frowned. "You trust her?" "I don't trust anyone," Jon said. "But I know what dragons do to cities. I've seen what fire turns men into." "You've seen her, Jon," Robb said, his voice sharper than it should have been. "You've stood before her, looked into her eyes. Are you telling us she's not a threat?" Jon paused, then nodded. "She's a threat, but maybe not the one we think." Robb stepped forward. "And what happens when she learns the truth?" The words hit like a sword. Everyone fell quiet. Jon's expression changed. "What truth?" Robb looked at the others, then back to his brother. "That you're not a bastard." The Godswood froze. Arya's hand slowly went to the hilt of her blade. Davos looked away. Tormund grunted, and the others just stared, as if Jon had grown wings. Robb spoke quietly now, with regret. "I didn't mean to keep it from you, but I've known since I returned. Sam Bran sent the truth to me months ago. You are Rhaegar Targaryen's son, legitimate. He married Lyanna. You're not Jon Snow." Jon felt the world tilt beneath him. "Not again. Not this lie. Not this name. Aegon Targaryen. You should have told me," Jon said, voice trembling. "I wanted to," Robb said. "But I feared what it would mean for us, for the North, for the throne," Jon whispered. Robb didn't answer, because they both knew. Jon had a stronger claim to the Iron Throne than anyone alive, and that meant Robb Stark was no longer the rightful king in the North. A shadow passed between them. It had no shape, no face, but it carried the weight of history, blood, and betrayal. That night, Arya came to Jon's chambers. "You should leave," she said. Jon turned to her, confused. "What? Not forever," she added. "But go south. Speak to Daenerys again, alone, before Robb decides you're too dangerous." Jon stared into the fire. "You think he would?" Arya's voice was cold. "I think Robb loves you, but kings don't keep brothers who can take their crowns." Jon nodded slowly. "And what if I don't want a crown?" Arya stepped back into the shadows. Wanting has never mattered in this world. Jon, just surviving. And far to the south, in the black heart of Dragonstone, Daenerys stood over a fire, her handmaids gone. Her eyes wide, the flames danced. In them she saw wolves, one burned, the other froze, and in between them a throne of ash, built on the bones of dragons and men. She whispered to the fire, to her ancestors, to the madness that ran in her blood. Let them come. The wolves of fire and ice were no longer united. One held the north, the other held the blood of kings. And in the silence between their names, war was already beginning. The wind howled through the gates of Winterfell the morning Jon left. No banners, no farewells. Just silence. Arya stood at the gate with Ghost beside her, hand resting on Needle. She didn't hug him. She only nodded. "Be careful down there," she said. Southerners smile with lips, but stab with eyes. Jon gave her a half-smile. "I'm not the same boy I was." "Good," she said, "because the girl I was died a long time ago." They looked at each other for a moment too long. Then Jon turned, mounted his horse, and rode out. Black cloak flapping behind him like a shadow chasing fire. The gate closed behind him. Robb watched from the battlements, arms folded, grey wind growling low at his side. "He'll return," Lord Umber muttered. Robb didn't reply. He was no longer thinking of Jon as a brother. Not anymore. He was thinking of him as a claim, because since Jon had arrived, the North had grown divided. Some of the older bannermen still followed Robb loyally, but the younger ones, the second sons, the outcasts, the ones who'd bled in foreign wars, they whispered Jon's name now, not as a brother, but as a Targaryen, a king, a conqueror. Inside the great hall, the division grew louder. Lord Manderley warned of rising support for Jon. "He walks like a Stark, but the fire in his blood calls to others." "And fire spreads, your grace." Robb slammed his cup down. "He's not my enemy." "Yet," muttered Lord Glover under his breath. Robb stood. "I led the North through war. I took back Winterfell. I bled for every stone of this castle. And if any man here thinks to bend the knee to a dragon, say it now." No one spoke, but no one cheered either, and Robb knew silence was the first symptom of rebellion. In the dungeons beneath Winterfell, Arya walked past the cells, whispering one name after another like old prayers. Walder Frey, Cersei Lannister, Melisandre. She stopped at a small, dim cell where a man was shackled, a Lannister scout caught days before. Now rotting in the dark, she crouched beside him. "You know what's funny about fire?" she asked, voice like wind. "It doesn't choose sides. It burns whoever's closest." The man said nothing, just stared in fear. Arya smiled. "Let them burn each other. I only need the ashes." Meanwhile, Jon reached Dragonstone again after 5 days of hard riding, the wind always cold at his back, as if the North itself were trying to hold him. Daenerys awaited him at the top of the stone stairs. She didn't greet him with smiles this time. "You came," she said. "I had to." They walked through the halls in silence. There was no one else, just firelit walls and the distant growls of dragons above. "I've seen what war does," she said finally. "To men, to families, to brothers." Jon looked at her. "So have I." Daenerys studied him carefully. "You and I, we are not enemies. We were never meant to be." "Tell that to the lords of the North," Jon muttered. "They already doubt me." She stepped closer. "Then give them a reason not to." He raised an eyebrow. "Come south with me," she whispered. "Fight by my side, not as my enemy, not even as my ally, but as something more." Jon felt the fire behind her words. But he also saw the steel. "You want me to bend the knee. I want you to take your place," she corrected. "You are Aegon Targaryen. You are more than a wolf. Jon stared into the flames dancing in the brazier between them. I don't want the throne, he said. But it wants you, she replied. And when thrones call, they don't ask for permission. Back in the north, Robb was unraveling. Lords argued. Scouts reported Dothraki riders gathering in the Stormlands. Dragon banners fluttered near the Reach. And still the whispers grew, why follow Robb when the blood of dragons flows through Jon Snow? That night, Robb sat alone in Ned's chamber, the fire long since dead. Grey Wind lay beside him, restless. The door opened. It was Arya. I know that look, she said. What look? The one father wore. The night before, everything fell apart, Robb exhaled, rubbing his face. They doubt me. Even now, Arya leaned against the wall. Then remind them who you are. Robb looked up. I'm tired of bleeding for men who doubt my name. Then stop bleeding, Arya said flatly. Start ruling. He stared at her, and in that moment, something inside Robb Stark hardened. At Dragonstone, Jon stood on the cliff edge, watching Drogon soar through the clouds. Daenerys joined him. Quiet. He spoke without turning. Robb won't forgive me for leaving. She looked out at the sea. He's already preparing for war, isn't he? Jon hesitated, then nodded. If I return as a threat. Daenerys' voice turned soft. Then don't return as a threat. Return as a king. Jon turned to her sharply. What are you asking? She stepped closer, her hand brushing his. What are you asking? She stepped closer, her hand brushing his. I'm not asking. I'm offering. And in her eyes he saw the truth. She didn't want to destroy him. She wanted to bind him, by blood, by fire, by throne. That night, Jon stood in the war room alone, staring at the painted table of Westeros. His hand rested near Dragonstone. But his eyes, they were locked on Winterfell, on the north, on home, and far away in a forest deep in the Vale. A masked rider met with a black-robed figure. A deal was struck, a bag of gold exchanged, and a single order whispered, when Jon Snow returns, he doesn't leave the north alive. The wolves of fire and ice had walked different paths, but fate was pulling them toward the same battlefield. One carried the crown of the north, the other a flame the world might not survive, and Westeros. Westeros was watching, waiting, for the first wolf to strike. The snows were heavier now. By the time Jon crossed the neck, Dragonstone's warmth felt like a forgotten dream. He rode at the head of a quiet host, 1,000 Dothraki, 200 unsullied, and a war council of misfits. Davos, Tormund, and Sandor Clegane, and behind them flew Rhaegal. Daenerys had not come herself. She said Westeros would fear a dragon less than a queen, for now, but her message was loud. Jon did not return as a bastard or a brother. He returned as a claim. Word spread faster than ravens. The dragon flies over the north. The bastard rides with foreign fire. He brings war, or worse, change. In Winterfell's great hall, Robb stared at the report without blinking. Dragon, he whispered. His advisors exploded into shouts and arguments. We can't let them near the gates. He's your brother. He's a Targaryen now. He's riding with Dothraki. Robb stood and silence dropped like a hammer. We will not kneel to fire. Arya followed him to the Godswood. You're going to fight him, she said quietly. Robb didn't deny it. I'll talk first. I owe him that. She studied him. But you're already sure how it ends. Robb looked at her, something hollow in his eyes. It ends like it always does in this world. Arya nodded slowly. With a sword between two people who swore they'd never use it. Jon saw Winterfell from the hills, the first time in weeks. Snow piled high along its walls. The gates were sealed, the ramparts lined with archers. Stark banners flew, but no welcome came. Tormund spat in the snow. So much for brotherly love. Jon dismounted. Send a rider. I want to speak with him, alone. The others hesitated but obeyed. A raven flew the same hour. And in Winterfell, Robb read Jon's message by candlelight. I come not to conquer, but to speak. Let no blood be spilled, not for me. I will come alone to the Godswood, as a brother. For the last time, if needed, Robb handed the parchment to Arya. He'll bring a blade. She handed it back. So will you. That night the godswood was quiet. Only the weirwood tree stood witness, its red leaves drifting down like drops of blood. Jon arrived first. Ghost padded behind him, silent and watchful. Snow clung to his black hair. Rhaegal circled high above the clouds, distant but near enough to burn it all down. If needed, Robb entered minutes later, wearing no crown. Grey Wind walked at his heel, his eyes locked on Ghost. For a long time, neither spoke, just the sound of old wind and young memories between them. Finally, Jon said, "This used to be the only place I felt peace." Robb looked up at the tree. "Father prayed here every day before war. Did it help?" Robb met his eyes. "No, he still died." Jon's jaw tightened. "I didn't come for a fight." "Then why come with a dragon?" "I needed to show strength." "So you'd hear me." Robb's voice rose. "You didn't need strength. You needed to send word. Come with northern men. Come as Jon Snow, not as Targaryen fire made flesh. I'm still Jon. No, you're not. You're Aegon now. You're a name that ends kingdoms." Jon stepped forward. "I didn't ask for it. I never wanted a throne. I still don't. Then why are you here?" Robb shouted. "To stop the next war," Jon said. "Because I've seen what fire does. What dragons do. What Daenerys wants. And you're what? Her leash." "I'm the only one she listens to," Robb scoffed. "She'll burn the North, not if we stand together." There it was, Jon's offer, alliance. Blood over banners. But Robb didn't answer right away. He walked a slow circle around the tree. "You want me to surrender," he said. "To hand you the North, or worse, let you become the bridge between the Dragon Queen and my people. I want peace. You want power. Even if you're too blind to admit it." Jon clenched his fists. "And what do you want, Robb? You think sitting on Father's chair makes you his shadow? You think holding Winterfell makes you king?" "I bled for that chair," Robb growled. "I buried men for it. I watched my mother and wife die because I believed in honor. And now you come here with a dragon, asking me to give it all away." "I'm not your enemy," Jon said. "But if you force me to become one..." Robb stepped close, face inches away. "Then what? Will you burn Winterfell to prove a point? Burn your home?" Jon's voice dropped. "I would burn myself before I burned Winterfell." For a second, everything stilled. Grey Wind and Ghost circled each other, tense but calm. Then Robb said quietly, "If you truly want peace, leave, walk away. Take your queen. Let the North be. And if I don't..." Robb's hand moved toward his sword. "Then the next time we meet, we don't talk." Jon left the godswood without another word. Ghost followed him in silence. Behind him, snow fell heavier, like the gods themselves wept at what had just died. That night, Robb called a council. "The Targaryen won't back down," he told them. "He'll come again. And next time, it won't be with words." Lord Manderley asked, "Will you strike first?" Robb nodded. "The North bends to no dragon, no fire, and no brother who's forgotten his name." Arya said nothing, but she watched Robb closely and wondered if he had forgotten his. Too, at the edge of the camp, Jon stood beside Rhaegal. The dragon growled low. Sensing the tension, Jon rested a hand on the beast's neck. "If it comes to fire," he whispered, "may the gods forgive us both." The wolves of fire and ice had crossed the last line. There would be no more words, only steel, only flame. Only who survives the winter? Who survives the winter? It began at dawn. The sky over Winterfell was grey, thick with snow. But far above, slicing through the storm like a blade, came the shadow of Rhaegal. His cry echoed across the land like the scream of a god awoken from sleep. Jon had returned, not to parley, but to finish what fate had already written in fire and blood. Below the clouds, the North was ready. Robb Stark stood upon the ramparts, armor black and silver, the direwolf sigil glowing faint under torchlight. Grey Wind prowled behind him, teeth bared, across the field. Thousands gathered, Stark bannermen, Riverland swords, Vale riders who had sworn fealty only days ago. And far beyond, in the frost-bitten hills, Jon's army approached, Dothraki screaming into the wind, unsullied cold as ice, and Jon himself, no longer dressed in black, but dark crimson and steel, a dragon sigil newly stitched beside the wolf. His face showed no joy, only burden. Inside Winterfell's hall, Arya prepared in silence. She wore no dress, no crown, only black leathers and a dagger laced with poison. Her heart was a knot of memory and fury. They had come so far. But like always, it ended the same, brother against brother, Stark against Stark. She didn't know who she'd kill if it came to it. But she knew one thing. She would survive, and the one who spilled innocent blood wouldn't. The armies met in the field before noon. Robb and Jon rode alone to the center, no guards, just the ghosts of the past walking with them. They dismounted 10 feet apart. Neither reached for a sword, yet Jon spoke first. "This doesn't need to happen." Robb's voice was like steel dragged across stone. "It already has." A long silence. Then Jon said quietly, "We could have ruled together." Robb shook his head. "We weren't meant to rule. We were meant to fight." And break, Jon stepped forward. "I don't want your throne, but you were born above it. That doesn't matter to me. It matters to them," Robb said, gesturing behind him. "And someday it'll matter to you." Jon clenched his jaw. "Then let it be my burden, not yours." Robb's hand drifted to the hilt of his sword. "I can't take that risk." And that's when it happened. A single arrow flew. No one saw who fired first. But the moment it hit the snow between them, the field erupted into chaos. The Dothraki charged, screaming death into the wind. The North met them with walls of shields and hammers. Steel clashed. Blood sprayed. Fire met ice as Rhaegal swooped low, unleashing flame near the tree line, scattering archers like dry leaves. Robb fought like a man possessed, cutting down unsullied with cold fury, grey wind at his side, tearing limbs and throats, but the fire was too strong. Even as his men held, they burned. The Dothraki swarmed the flanks. The unsullied advanced like a black tide, and at the center of it all, Jon. He moved through the chaos toward Robb like a ghost through fog, blade drawn, ghost howling beside him. They met in the heart of the storm. Steel rang against steel. No words now, just rage. Years of brotherhood turned to ash in every swing. Robb fought with honor. Jon fought with sorrow. Robb struck high. Jon dodged low. Jon went for the leg. Robb blocked, countered, slashed across Jon's side. Blood. They broke apart. Panting. "You don't have to die," Jon gasped. Robb's eyes shone with grief. Neither did father or mother. "But the world doesn't care what we want." He lunged again. Their blades locked, and for a moment it seemed Jon would fall, until Arya's voice rang out, "Stop!" Both turned, breathless, bloodied, as Arya stepped between them, dagger in hand, eyes wild with fury. "This is what they want," she said. "Cersei, the old lords, the gods, let the wolves tear each other apart, while the lions wait to rule the bones." Jon lowered his sword first. Robb hesitated, then did the same. But fate is cruel. A crossbow bolt sliced through the air, struck Arya in the shoulder. She fell. Jon screamed. Ghost lunged toward the tree line, and from the shadows, a Lannister scout emerged, already knocking another bolt. But before he could fire again, grey wind tore his throat out. Jon ran to Arya. Catching her before she hit the snow, blood bloomed across her tunic. "You're going to be okay," he said. Her voice shaking, she grinned through gritted teeth. "Don't lie to me, Targaryen." Robb knelt beside them, and in that moment all war, all hatred, vanished between the three. Just family, just wolves, dying together in the snow. Arya survived. Barely. The battle didn't end with victory, but with silence. Robb and Jon declared a truce before nightfall. Their men didn't cheer. They simply buried the dead and walked away from the fire. A week later, in the halls of Winterfell, Jon and Robb stood alone. No swords, no banners, just two brothers beneath a broken sky. "You should go south," Robb said. "End what's left of Cersei. Take Daenerys if you must." Jon looked away. "I'm done with thrones." "You'll never be done with them," Robb said softly. "That's the curse of your name." Jon turned. "And you?" Robb shrugged. "I'll rule the North, but not as a king. No more crowns. No more wars between brothers. Jon smiled faintly. That's the smartest thing I've ever heard you say. They clasped arms. For the first time in years. There was peace between them, hard-earned, scarred, but real. Arya recovered. Though she never walked the same, she left soon after. No one knew where. Some said she sailed west, past where the maps ended. Others said she stalked the south, killing the last of the lions, but no one ever dared call her girl again. And so, the story of the wolves of fire and ice ended not with one on a throne, or the other in the ground, but with both alive, changed, and choosing to be men. Not myths, because in the end thrones fall, crowns melt, but brothers remember. Brothers remember.